Hello, my name is Mark Holmes. I'm the editorial director of Via Satellite, and we're back for one of our Thursday morning conversations where we talk about some things going on in the industry and really sort of have a conversation about things that are impacting the big players in our industry. Joining me today, I'm delighted, we have Koen Williams, who's Head of International Government Market Development at ST Engineering iDirect. And we also have Steve Slater, who's the Managing Director of GRC. So, Koen, Steve, welcome. How are you both doing today?
Really good. Lovely day in Hereford, so no complaint.
What's the weather like
here?
It's okay. It's okay.
Excellent. And Koen, where are you based?
I'm based in Ghent, which is in Belgium, so in the Flanders region, so the northern part of Belgium. So, and sun is shining here as well, so all good.
Excellent. Well, as the sun is shining, let's talk about advanced mobility, which is one of the reasons why we're here today. And I'm going to start with a question for Koen, because we're hearing this term more and more in the industry, advanced mobility, a term that obviously we heard a lot in the webinar yesterday with customers. For those of us who are watching this for the first time, tell us, what is advanced mobility and why do you think it's such a big talking point right now?
Well, I think, of course, I'm not going to give the whole expose on what is advanced mobility. The point is that we had a webinar with yourself yesterday, and I would like to refer people, of course, to that webinar and to the content that we have online. But in a nutshell, you've got mobility and mobility. As an end user, you expect whenever you require communication that communication comes towards yourself. And the difference between mobility and advanced mobility is the fact that, okay, you receive something and you're happy to receive something, and that's the mobility scenario. But in the advanced mobility, you need connectivity all of the time. It's resilient, it's secure, and it provides you with the right data at the right time in the right granularity. So even though you are in a dispersed operations, even though you are moving across different beams, different satellites, different constellations. So as such, the seamless experience, high quality experience, that is what we call the enhanced mobility. So that's from an end user perspective. Of course, you got the middleman or the service provider perspective. Obviously, they want to make money, and you need to provide them with enough efficiency and a quality of service. And also, you need to give them the ability to differentiate themselves, so the ability to differentiate their services and customize their services. So that is also a part of the mobility that is sometimes forgotten, but is very important for satellite operators and service providers. So that's, for me, advanced mobility in a nutshell.
Very good explanation. One of the things that struck me on the webinar yesterday, Koen, was the diversity of the customer segments that you're working with, whether it's government, defense, humanitarian, maritime. It's really interesting just how much this technology applies across the sector. Does that make it sort of challenging for a company like ST Engineering iDirect, that your technology is being used in so many different ways?
Well, first of all, I would like to agree to the fact that indeed we've seen an increase in demand. I mean, it's also due to the fact that operations get more complex. You don't have these big deployments anymore, and you've got more and more operations that are on the move, small. So as such, indeed, we've seen that question popping up and coming more towards us. And that means if you have different types of mobility. I mean, across land, across air, and across sea, but also across different verticals, across different applications, across different customers. So you have a system that is in tune with such kind of diverse environment, and also a multi-service environment, because over some systems they are okay just to have access to data, right? Or if you're on an aircraft and you're accessing the internet, it's a totally different thing than when you are again on aircraft, but you are relaying ISR traffic, because it's the traffic goes the other way. The big pipe traffic goes the other way. So as such, you need to be able to cater for all these different applications, and that's indeed how we built our system. It's really taking all these use cases into perspective and applying them also to our platform. So indeed, and that's why we call it a multi-service platform, is because it's really exactly built for that purpose, to cater for different applications, different markets, but also different customers with different user requirements.
And before we talk to Steve, I mean, what is sort of the next evolution of ST Engineering iDirect's approach when it comes to advanced mobility? How do you sort of see it developing still further?
Well, that's of course looking a bit further beyond. I think what we've done already our homework pretty well, right? And I think today the job is more on the terminal providers of the flat panel antennas, etc. So I think we already did a decent job. But if we look towards future, we look towards newer constellations. We need to support these newer type of constellations in a multi-orbit perspective. We need to be able to cater for new waveforms, so the 5G NR waveform, for example, in future. And also there is the aggregation of data, and in fact it's the convergence of platforms and of data that we see, and the convergence of applications. So what I basically mean is that also the space segment, the ground segment, the service layer, and the end user segment are all converging into one big system. And so you need to build an architecture to cater for that, and you need a system that also can cater for mobility applications, where you have terminals roaming from one end to the other end, that are based on software-defined solutions, so that they can adapt their personality according to the network that they're on. So that's something that we call a multi-personality modem. But also that they are withstanding the environment conditions, right? It could be that they are deployed in harsh conditions, so you need some type of ruggedizing. They need to be what we call considering a swap, so a size, weight, and power. So these things are already stuff that we're doing, but where we even could still make sure that our solutions become smaller, and as on-the-move applications don't have a lot of footprint on the top of their roof or on an aircraft, we need to think about getting these things smaller and more performant, and for sure also more flexible.
Okay, let's bring Steve into the conversation now and have a slightly different perspective. Which aspects of the capabilities that ST Engineering iDirect just referred to as advanced mobility does GRC see as the most critical to its successful delivery of its land mobility services and solutions?
So from a GRC perspective, we have approximately about 180 ST Engineering advanced mobility systems deployed. Government, defense, industry, and just picking up on some of Koen's points, that always-on communication is imperative for our demanding end users. That whole piece of, be it on GEO, MEO, NEO, doesn't really matter. People just want to pick up their communications system and make sure it works every time. In terms of, and you mentioned size, weight, and power, always add on performance at the end. Certainly with the systems we're using from ST Engineering, the iDirect family, performance is key, and it doesn't always work. So the flat panel piece, people looking to the future, everybody wants a small flat panel, without doubt. The parabolics, people are moving on. So certainly looking to the future, it's that whole flat panel piece that people want. The other thing I could mention about that, using systems in austere conditions and having a need for ruggedized systems. So we, a couple of years ago, took on looking at the SE Engineering product family in the standard 19-inch racks, and we've done just that. We've ruggedized their modems into that small secure box, and they've been deployed across the globe for the last 3 years without fault. So, and that's where an SME, we're an SME where you can come into your own, you can look at, and you have that direct engagement with customers, end users, understand their requirements, and adapt as necessary using the expertise of SE Engineering.
Let's talk a little bit more about those customer requirements, and firstly in terms of trends, and has there been maybe a significant evolution in those sort of demands and requirements from customers over the last maybe 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, it's probably, I've been here 7 years, and certainly last 3 to 4 years, it's that high performance, high bandwidth requirements, the ease of use, and certainly using one of our partners, iDirect partner as well with Intelsat, and having the ability to just switch on, use your data, high data throughput. You've got the flexibility of the CIRs, the MIRs, depending on the type of operation or user need, you can select between the two, and the iDirect platforms facilitate whatever it is the customer wants.
I mean, it is super interesting when we look at, I mean, we sort of touched upon the customer demands in the first question with sort of Kuhn and stuff. Do we sort of feel that in some ways satellite is becoming a little bit more sort of almost like mainstream now, and that expectations from customers are more demanding than ever? They're expecting more from perhaps satellite technology than they were a few years ago. How would you?
Certainly, absolutely. In my day when I joined the military back in 1979, we had a couple of kilobits to play with. Nowadays, it's high throughput, up to 180 megabits on certain systems. From a customer point of view, they just know it's going to be there. They rely on the OEMs, the prime contractors, the ST engineers of the world, and certainly the SMEs to give them a requirement within a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. You've given them a solution, and they can walk out the door. And this is, humanitarian effort in Africa as well. They can turn on that system, deploy anywhere within a couple of minutes, and that's what's changed. Certainly in the last couple of years, whereas before maybe 30 minutes to an hour, people trying to set up communications. Nowadays, with the technology and the ability of these systems to be switched on, up and running within a couple of minutes, and more importantly, the ease of use. No longer do you need to be a technical person to operate the equipment. It can be literally anybody. After a couple of minutes training, they can be up and running with these systems.
That really is an amazing change when you think about it, isn't it? That it's like that it's almost straight away now, and that
And it's that whole market, that whole no moving parts. And for somebody on the ground where capability is key, to actually press one button and you're communicating, be it auto steering or just a high performing antenna or terminal, and one button and you're up and running.
Excellent. Let's go back to Kuhn, because one of the themes yesterday was this enabling of networks and connecting dispersed operations on the move, on the pause assets across military, government, commercial capacity with agile, multi-layered security, resilient multi-orbit and multi-access networks. I mean, it sounds a tremendously difficult challenge. How are you able to do this, and how are you enabling these very ambitious network strategies to become a reality?
Well, obviously, we have the best engineers in the industry, so I think that's credit to us. But I think it's also by listening to our customers, right? I think that comes in the first place. We've got some pretty demanding customers, and as such, we always try indeed to make sure that we're in tune with the latest requirements that they have, but also, this industry is changing so quickly, and it's very difficult to keep pace. So let's say the pace of innovation is starting to outpace our pace of innovation, because in the past sometimes we were well up front, too advanced. At times we were doing stuff that only became evident 3 or 4 years later. But now we see that even demands are starting to outpace our innovations as well, right? So we need to keep track, and we need to stay in balance with, okay, what innovation is exactly required, and what is the most demand coming from our customers in terms of requirements. So as such, building a system is obviously it's not simple as you stated. It's so you need to build a system that is totally flexible and scalable, and those are really the cornerstones on how we build our system. So it's basically making sure that whenever there comes a new requirement, that we can easily build it on top of what we already have, so that we don't need a total rebuild of our system, right? So it's trying to go also towards open architectures, also more software-defined solutions. And as such, in the past, it was all about hardware. We were box sellers, etc. But now it's all about software-defined. It's about indeed software on top of hardware, rather than the other way around. And as such, that gives us much more flexibility. And then, of course, when you then push the processing towards the edge, and you also use cloud and all the latest tools that are available to yourselves, that really helps a lot. Another element that helps us is obviously that, again, we have the convergence with the terrestrial world. Whereas satellite in the past was something niche, now you see a convergence towards terrestrial world, because basically you see more and more hybrid networks, and that is also a firm requirement. So we can leverage the technology that's already out there, and use the same type of architectures, interfaces, etc. And everything linked to 5G, the open the type of 5G networks, and how these networks are being constructed will certainly help us in future building more flexible networks.
Koen, I'm going to stay with you. I mean, I know we have a number of tremendously intelligent, knowledgeable people in this industry, but there may be people who are watching this Thursday morning conversation and thinking, well, what's the difference between advanced mobility and mobility? I mean, surely mobility was advanced in the first place. If you could maybe summarize very, very quickly, you know, what is the key difference between advanced mobility and mobility? How would you sum that up?
Yeah, well, it's in the user experience, I would say. And I think Steve touched upon that again. So in the past, you were happy that you got something, and it wasn't always available at all locations. Now, basically, you have a system, and wherever you roam, wherever you go, on whatever platform, you have that connectivity, but also it gives you the service that you provide for that specific moment. So, for example, if you're in operation and okay, you were just consuming little data, that's fine, because the system would automatically adapt itself and make sure that you use very small bandwidth. But instantaneously, you could come across certain element that would force you to go towards more bandwidth. For example, you have a sensor that flashes on, or you want to use a sensor to track a target, and you need very high granularity, high definition video. So instantaneously, the system will adapt to that, even though that you're on the move, right? So is that automated function? It's that always on, as Steve mentioned it, but it's also that basically you have the flexibility to get all of these services all of the time. Plus, when you have that kind of capability, you also are performing maybe better than your adversary or your competitor. So it means it gives you a competitive advantage or a strategic advantage if you're in theater. So, and that's all about that, and that's really the difference between advanced mobility and normal mobility connectivity. It's really using the system to give yourself a strategic advantage.
And I'm going to put that question to Steve, actually, because I'd like to get sort of you come at it from a slightly different perspective, as we've discussed. But what does advanced mobility mean to you and working with your customers?
Yeah, to make an analogy, it's that mobile phone experience. People with the technology they have at home on their person, that the expectation now is to deploy forward, be it on operations, be it in industry, mining, be it in humanitarian relief in Africa. And they expect that mobile experience, potentially with additional features like security embedded for certain things. That's not just for the military, that's for industry, trying protection of data. So all that stuff combined on your personal technology, you expect to just deploy and it will work. And it does, it really does. That always on, up and running in minutes, that high definition video, back to a headquarters, back to a business center. But that's what that advanced mobility provides. And we see it day in, day out. We run a 24/7 network operations center here. So we're always talking to our deployed users, and we're providing that service with the likes of SE Engineering and that advanced mobility. And the cloud services, people know cloud services, intelligent customers, as we call them, and they expect their services to be instantly accessible and secure. I just want to go back to a point that Koen made, and it's always something we talk about in the company where we are, where I am today, and that's not getting too carried away with inventing and designing stuff that you think people want, and going back to Koen's piece about user requirements, and it's designing against user requirements, because people can get carried away and design something that actually no one really needs. They might want it, but they don't actually need it.
And do you sort of feel that, Steve, that the satellite industry, ST Engineering, iDirect, is really sort of getting that, and they've really sort of raised their game? And have you been surprised by just the level of progression that we've seen?
Yeah, certainly. And as I said before, certainly in the 4 years. But more importantly, they're not arrogant enough to just listen to themselves. They listen to SMEs, they listen to end users and customers and say, look, if I only had this feature, doesn't mean every time they're going to embed the feature into their capabilities, but they'll listen. And more importantly, they'll react to ongoing changes in the world, with security features. They can upgrade their technology to encompass that. And we're seeing that as we speak.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, we could carry on this conversation a lot longer. It's, I think it's, we're at such an exciting inflection point in our industry. There's so much innovation, particularly on the ground side with companies like ST Engineering, iDirect, and it's put our industry in really good shape for the future. So, Steve, Koen, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you both today and hear about not just where we are with the technology, but how the technology is going to make a difference to customers going forward. You know, it really is tremendous to hear, you know, what our technology or what the technology is doing in all of these different market sectors, and how the evolution, whether it's an evolution or revolution, I don't know, but it's certainly progressed very quickly. Koen, I know ST Engineering iDirect has done some great work, and we wish you all the best over the next 2 years as you continue to develop those technologies. And again, we didn't really go into sort of software and cloud, but that's a whole nother discussion that, you know, maybe another time we can talk about. Steve, it was great to hear your viewpoint as well, and great to see how dramatic those changes have been in terms of how you use the technology. So I'm going to sign out. So thank you, Koen and Steve, for your time today. Really appreciate it. This is Mark Holmes. I'm the editorial director of VIA Satellite. We hope you've enjoyed this Thursday morning conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.